So how have you experienced working with family members, and would you advise against it or for it?
So that's a great question. So will they always be the best person for every role? No. However, there's a different level of trust that can come on there that helps you get to the same part, right? Because family will battle more than anything else, but they'll also stand behind you more than anyone else.
So you're battling with what you should be doing or what's an ideal thing that you should be doing versus what's the current narrative.
The family wants everyone to do well, but feelings get in the way. And that conflicts with the doing well because everybody has their feelings hurt that someone else is trying to make them less worthy, when in fact it's not the case.
I often see parents being very disciplinary, and I also know that that kid might be 6. So then you think, wow, I want to teach my kid everything. But then you realize until the age of 18 or even like 14, your kid is going to become his own person, influenced by society, what he sees on social media, what his friends tell him, that you realize as parents, we don't really have much say at all. So then I think, well, my job isn't to teach my kid everything I've learned. My job is to equip them with what is life and simply love them unconditionally.
I completely agree that we cannot keep our kids in a box, but we can show them what we believe is the right principles, the right morals, and then it's for them to adopt them. Many times we say no so quick without the answer to why.
Tell me what you do, who you are, and why you do it.
Sure. Yeah, great to be here. My name is Jason Yarusi. I'm a real estate investment manager. I have acquired about 300 million in apartment communities back since 2017. That's led me on a long path from becoming a real estate investor back in the early 2013 time after running a family construction business, opening a few restaurants, bars, and a brewery that I had sold. And before that, back in the early 2000s, I was a bartender. So I had a very non-traditional route to where I was today. And from there, I've now stepped out to help other people level up their fundamentals, just really go out and achieve peak performance, which I think is something that can really help people get out of the rut that they're in through a program called Live 100. It's a foundational program to help you break your bad habits so you can build momentum and get the success that you deserve to have.
So I always think that, I don't like to mix business and pleasure, because if you've got an employee, then you can say what needs to be said. If they aren't doing something, then you can feel no guilt, and just say, look, you're not doing what I need you to do. If you can't do this, then I'm going to have to fire you and get someone else in. Whereas when you have a family member, you now see them as this family person, forgiving, understanding, empathy. And then you've got the role of, I need this job to be done. And you kind of allow things to be sloppy that you wouldn't allow an employee to do. And I'm sure there is some situations where it does work if they respect, okay, we need to appreciate that we're family and we've got our roles, and we don't want to make each other's life complicated by not being able to say something that you would say to an employee. Then I believe it can work. But if you've got other people in the family that don't have the same mindset as a boss, because at the end of the day, one person is a boss, and a boss mindset is different to an employee mindset. If they don't understand and appreciate that, then it can be very sloppy. So how have you experienced working with family members, and would you advise against it or for it?
So that's a great question. So I actually met my wife back when I was a bartender, right? And so now we are business partners who work together. And so we learned how to work together before we became a couple, right? So that's one instance. However, as part of my companies, back through my construction company, even today to my real estate investment firm, my aunt and my brother work for me. So there's that point. Will they always be the best person for every role? No. However, there's a different level of trust that can come on there that helps you get to the same part, right? Because family will battle more than anything else, but they'll also stand behind you more than anyone else. And there's a hard line of course, emotional respect and just respect from a job. My goal here is, imagine you can take a business and you can help it perform to a magnitude that not only can help, you know, the people that work for you, but also help your family, right? That's a huge level that you can continue to up level for everyone around you. Now, when I did transition from the bars and restaurants, I went out to help the family construction business. And my dad had that business for over 40 years. So coming into that business, just like anything, right? You know, times change, things move, right? So when you go in to try to help dad, what could be the conflict? What the conflict could be is that dad's done this one way for many, many, many years. And could there be an easier way? Yeah, absolutely. But this is the way he's done it. So when you want to come in there, you want to help dad, there's that level of respect, but also of, you know, we could do it this way, right? Many times as we fought through the challenges, we grew. Because I came out there, he was doing about 12 projects a year. At one point, we had gotten the business up to doing about 250 projects a year. So massive scale. And so when you jump from a small to a middle to a bigger business, right? There's challenges and new discoveries you have to face at each point. And when you're doing things the way you did them as a small business, as you go to a big business, things are not going to work the same way. Things are going to break. And we have so much attention on one person who's basically, you know, my dad was the doer, the idea part, and the one who would get it to completion. Well, we couldn't have my dad doing every task and we wouldn't be able to scale. So we had that battle of saying, hey, Dad, we're trying to walk through the wall right now. We're trying to walk through the wall. And I get it. That has worked many years, just to battle and push through the wall. But right to the left of you is a door. Why don't we just take the door? And it was not an easy transition. But when we came to the resolution, and it wasn't something of a conflict of a family, but this is how we can make the business better. It slowly, I'll say slowly, started to transition for the better for everyone. Because when my dad get back, he was able to do less work and be better as a manager, as someone who could go out there and use his advice that could transform and help other people doing. So it started to allow the business to really manifest to the level that it could be to do that many projects a year.
Yeah, so my dad, you know, has run his own business and done everything his way. And as I was getting older, I used to come into his workshop at like 13, 14, and I'd start saying, why don't you do it like this and do it like that? And I'd start doing things that he hasn't approved for me to do. So he'll be like, where's my hammer? And I've hung it up on a hook because I think if it's on a hook, then you're going to know where it is. But he knows where he left it. So you're battling with what you should be doing or what's an ideal thing that you should be doing versus what's the current narrative. And what I found is that if people have control, then they want control. But if, for example, there is an organic transfer to having no responsibility, that all of a sudden when somebody comes to you with something, you want nothing to do with it. So, for example, if I'm in control, I want to deal with everything. If I'm not in control, I don't really want to. So there's a sense of I like to be in charge. But then if I've given it to somebody else and somebody messages me and says, do this, I'm like, no, get them to do with it. So it seems that your dad went from this in control, feeling that power, to organically letting you or whoever take over and change your narrative. And then once you kind of have that sense of no responsibility and this freedom of there's no weight on me, when you compare that, I personally think that it's a better feeling of having no weight and no responsibility and having someone else do it. And to the point where you don't really care what goes on, what they do anymore. You've kind of gone beyond caring because really it was about having control, not necessarily wanting things to be a certain way. And if you don't know any different, then it is a hard transition. And I used to battle with my dad massively until he basically realized, son, you're going to have to go off and do it yourself because, you know, you basically become me and we're basically competing against each other. We're like two boxers in a ring with the same skill and we're destroying each other's personal relationship. And that's when we stopped arguing and I just accepted that's him and what he's going to be like. He's accepted this is me and what I'm going to be like. And then you create your own departments. As you say, your dad now is in a management role, for example, as opposed to like head chief controlling everything role. And that is the beauty of the transition between father and son, if you end up not killing each other along the way.
Yeah, well, that's the point, is that they're not killing each other along the way. Because usually what we miss is that the family wants everyone to do well, but feelings get in the way. And that conflicts with the doing well because everybody has their feelings hurt that someone else is trying to make them less worthy. When in fact, it's not the case. but feelings get in the way, especially, we're a bunch of Italians, right? And that gets mixed into the mold of what it is. And for my dad, he had done this, we actually got my dad retired like 2 years ago, and he had done this over 50 years, right? And so you think about something like that. You've done something the same way for 50 years. Think about how hard that is to break that habit that you've done, right? And you talked about, the hammer being hung up, right? I call it, organized chaos. And we had a lot of that. We had a lot of organized chaos that was going on. It was organized, but it was chaotic, right? And so you couldn't repeat it. And every time someone needed to learn something, you had to teach them the chaos. And then they had to come along with the chaos. But when my dad had a crew of 3 people, he was one of the members that had to really carry a lion's share of the work. But when you have 25 people on a team, and then dad is the one digging a hole with a shovel, something's broken in the mold. And you have to give him the guidance of why we want to pull him out. But at the same time, you can't push him to the decision, right? You have to allow dad to see the opportunity to step out, right? You have to say, here's our opportunity for what we can do. You can dig this hole, and I guarantee it will be the best hole, right? So, it will be perfect, right? It will be exactly how you want it. But we need to do 50 other things right now that are being held up because you're doing this one task right now where we have 19 guys watching you. So what could we do differently here? And allow them to come up with solutions that we can all work together, right? And is there conflict along that route? Yes, because they're going to do it, they're going to do it the best way. And that's what they are. My dad had very, high level of how the project should look, how everything should do. And I'm just digging a hole as an example, but just every part of the project, right? And there's certain parts where, yes, we have to really make sure it's perfect, but there's other parts where we just need to get it done. And that's the difference between driving forward to a new level of success compared to where we were. And were there challenges? Absolutely. But if you keep repeating the message, either it's just going to fall on deaf ears forever, or it's going to start to hit in a certain time, right? And it's like, one day you say it and the next day you say it again. And for whatever reason, that carried more weight than the 20, 30, 40 days prior. And from that part, we kept repeating the message and looking for a different path in a different way. And he started to be more amenable. Part of this is, he's in his 60s, going in the 70s, and doing hard labor, it takes a toll on you.
Yeah, so my dad has basically been the foundation of a family business that his mum run his whole life. So he's used to just doing everything, whatever needed doing, the hole, the pipe, the patio, the tarmac, whatever, he'll do it. And now it's been handed down, but he's still doing the labor graft work he was doing 30 years ago. And I'm like, you're now a director. Why the fuck are you still in the workshop hammering? You've got 3 people in the workshop. Why are you here? And again, it's very hard to suddenly go from your brain just doing all of this to just having someone else do it. And you're looking at them and they're not doing it the same way, maybe not as good, but when you don't have control, you have to surrender that baby and just say, look, you're now someone else's. Like when you walk somebody down the park, down the wedding, down the aisle, then now
the key thing is they enjoy doing it, right? He also enjoys doing that part. And so like, that's maybe one of the parts. And like my dad, like he likes doing the labor part. And so that's a hard thing to take away from him, because like, even though it's a task that we see is like, man, you're so experienced, you're so skilled, you know all these things. Like, why don't you go in this part? Well, that may be something that just absolutely, enjoy the tinkering, enjoy the parts, enjoy those parts, even if it's not their highest calling. And it's hard to pull away from someone. I can imagine for your dad to step out of that role. He's like, that's what I enjoy. I get where my energy comes from.
Yeah, like that's his workshop. His brain is that organized chaos. He knows where the screws are and the hammers are and the plastic is, even though it's just shit everywhere. And for someone else to come in and then do the same job that he's always known for 40, 50 years, and he's also 60, it is very hard. Like that's been his purpose. That's all he's ever known. And yes, there is other things out there that will give you purpose, but you won't realize that unless you allow somebody for the better of the business, when you take your own ego out of it, there's more to life. But if you're still in there, still trying to hold that control, you're never going to see that. And when you get to that point, it is now no longer about you and your ego. It's about the business and your children and the generation below. And again, once somebody is doing your job, naturally, you're going to say, no, do it this way. But when you have, say, a managing director take over your business, you have to trust their judgment and that they will grow the business. You can't micromanage. Otherwise, you'll be running the business forever and you won't be able to grow. And it's very hard when someone doesn't know any different to just say, I know you're not doing it like me, but I'm going to let you just get on with it. As long as the sandwich is made, I don't care whether you butter the bread first, put the ham in first, butter it afterwards. Don't give a shit. As long as the sandwich is made and the customer's happy, fantastic. And that is a hard transition.
Yeah, trust comes in different ways for people. Some people will just trust out of the gate, right? Some people will trust but have to verify. Others will have to see some kind of action before they'll ever give the trust. And we all have that pattern of how we find trust in people, and especially when it's something, near and dear. Like your dad's had that business for many years, or my dad's had this business for many years. Yours goes past, your dad, even to your grandma, right? So, to make sure that it continues in the levels, right? That's important. And to pass it along, it seems very difficult. And I can imagine, right, if I was your dad or my dad, like I just that transition where we come from a different generation, we come from different ages, we've seen different things, just in, we're exposed to different things, where we're used to just more information, right, more opportunity for technology, right, where in fact, you think when they were both starting out, they had nothing, right? You would go and then, just going to work in the day, like there was no phone. Like my dad's out there working somewhere. He would just leave in the morning and come back at night, right? Now they have all this technology, all these things, all these emails, all these phones, all these text messages that happen throughout the day to either empower the job forward or add levels to the job, right? So they have to transition to this pattern, but many push back on it because it's so foreign to how they've acted in all their time. And so, right, they will take it on to what they can, to the extent. But then it's for us to come up and step and help empower them forward too, which it looks like you're in there doing too.
What I find amazing is it's almost like this universal transition. If you look at Trump and his father, his father was doing everything. Trump admired him. Trump became basically his dad from spending so much time with him. And then eventually he takes over. And yet there was a story where Trump's dad went into the casino and put £1 million in and lost it on purpose because Trump was going to shit in the casino. So even though his dad was at this point like 80 years old and Trump was a full-grown man doing everything his dad was doing, his dad couldn't help but get involved or try and help his son in some form. It's almost like, we're designed to take control and lead. But then when we have a son, naturally you spend so much time with your parent that you want to become them. And then at some point you do have to step down mentally, physically, but yet you are still that alpha dominant male. So naturally, you can't just give up completely. Like my dad in the workshop, he still wants to make a box. He's making a fucking box. But the point is that was his purpose for so long. That's all he's known. Trump's dad's like 80, he wants to retire, but he still can't help get involved with something. Because if you didn't get involved in anything, you're basically saying, I had a purpose my whole life. Now my son's taken over the purpose. I now have to find a new purpose. But what purpose do I do? How can you just suddenly find a brand new purpose when you've done the same purpose for 50 years? Because you're literally just sort of entering into a world with endless possibilities and saying choose one. And then you don't know what might be your purpose out of those millions of possibilities. It could take a few years to do art before you realize, actually, I don't like art. Or I'm going to do some football. I don't like football. I'm going to try ballet. And before you know it, you're dead. So it's easier just to fall back into that comfortable feeling of, this is my purpose. This is all I've known. I know what I get from this. And this is easy. Otherwise, you're a lost person without a purpose. And that can just lead to all kinds of mental health issues, which is very scary if you don't have a purpose.
Yeah, well, you look at yourself, and I have young kids now, and as I transition, right, I think about it like as I go through life, right, I have my purpose for my belt, but my greatest purpose is going to be how I can pass along my beliefs and my principles to my kids, right? But as kids, right, you think usually it's that chain where as you grow up, like your parents are superheroes, and then you get into your teens, and then you think your parents know nothing, right? And then you go into your 20s, and your parents maybe know something, and you get into your 30s and your 40s, you see how much they knew, right, and how they were trying to just pass down what they had, right? And so we go in that evolution of just superhero to they don't know anything, to they know everything, and they're just trying to help us along, right? And as a parent, it's hard because this is what we do, but it's very powerful and very important to see that our kids can carry forward in a successful way. And if it's in our business, fantastic. If it's not, great. How can we give them good principles, good morals, good evolution, so they can go out there and make good decisions? We're not going to make every decision for them, but hopefully we've taught them some things along the way, even if they don't agree with it in the moment. Most of the times we don't, that when they look back on it, they will understand that we were there to try to help, not in part hold them back.
Yeah, in England, well, any country really, you've got farmers and land being handed down. So you've got a farming company in the UK, chickens, cows, and their dad had it, and their dad had it, and their dad had it. And it's been handed down from generation after generation. And back in the day, there wasn't pretty much anything to do apart from like farming and mining and shit like that. There was like 6 jobs. Here's what you do. Now there's millions of jobs, and the pressure somebody might feel these days, continuing the family farming business to the point where they get mental health issues and they end up killing themselves. A lot of farmers in the UK end up killing themselves because the pressure they feel to keep the family farm going, that it just becomes unbearable. And they can't even have the chat with their father, because how do you explain that? I don't want anything to do with this business that you spent your life keeping up for me because your father did the same for you. How do you have that chat? And I often see parents being very disciplinary, right? And I also know that that kid might be 6, but he's at the park for an hour after school. You have no idea what he's doing, what he's talking about with his friends. You think you're the sole parent and giving your child everything. He's got a whole world going on himself. So then you think, wow, I want to teach my kid everything. But then you realize until the age of 18 or even like 14, your kid is going to become his own person, influenced by society, what he sees on social media, what his friends tell him, that you realize as parents, we don't really have much say at all, because in the grand scheme of things, they will listen to us, if you're lucky, for 10 years, up until they go into secondary school. And then they've got this millions of other narratives, teachers, parents, dads, children's older brothers, cousins, TV, social media, that they're not going to listen to one person. They've got all this other stuff, and that they're shaped by 80 years of their life. So then I think, well, my job isn't to teach my kid everything I've learned. My job is to equip them with what is life and simply love them unconditionally. And then when you realize that, you realize, wow, so many people try and control their kids and make them be a certain way, be a certain religion. This is what is expected of you because my dad taught me this. And then they end up hating you. They end up hating you. If you look at children who have this very strict parenting and the parent has no idea that you enforcing your belief system on them is making them hate you, it's very powerful. And then you realize unconditional love will do anything. They will come to you if you just love them. And that telling somebody what to do, bringing it down generations, really doesn't work.
You know, I left the family business without doing it right. You know, went to college and went off, and it was hard, right? And to say the only thing I can look back on, I can't speak to the decision in the moment, was that if I had done that at the time, I would have, you know, regretted, right? I would have been angry. I would have not been happy with the decision. But the life lessons that I learned for the decade that I wasn't within the family business allowed me to have a clearer mind and a clearer understanding of just life overall. So when I did come back, I could be helpful and resourceful and not something of a debt to the business. And it's not easy, but my dad, he wasn't happy with the decision, but he respected the decision. And that can be very difficult, right? This has been the family business. I can think of someone who's had a farm, it's passed down through generations, and to leave, it's not an easy decision. And I can't speak to the right answer. All I can speak to is that it allowed me to be in a better position when I did come back to help with the business. And so I completely agree that we cannot keep our kids in a box, but we can show them what, and again, what we believe is, you know, the right principles and right morals. And then it's for them to adopt them, right? Because if we force it upon them, you know, anything that's forced upon you, you resist. It's usually just our instinct, right away, that we're going to resist. However, if you give them the guidance, right, and give them the opportunity of just, you know, my kids are, you know, young, right? They make a poor choice, and instead of saying no, right, because no, just it's almost like that reaction, like don't touch the stove. But if you say, okay, that was a choice made, is there another choice potentially could be made, and you talk it through and you give them other angles. Am I perfect at that? No. You know, sometimes I'm saying no, but in that same part, I try to be aware of it, self-aware of it, because many times we say no so quick without the answer to why, right? Don't do this. But it may just be in the moment, but then they get that counter effect, that shock effect of just, oh, I better not do that. And it keeps them risk averse in their life. And they get caught in this position of just not being prepared later on in life.
Yeah, so I was always told no growing up, and as a result, I was the fucking devil because I don't believe you should tell any animal no. You don't see a chimpanzee telling another chimp, get down from that tree, don't take that banana. Doesn't exist. If he wants a banana, he's getting a banana. So you shouldn't tell a kid or anybody, any adult, anybody, what to do, because it's their own choice. And you know, if I have kids and I don't want kids, you wouldn't tell them no. You'd say, we don't touch this hot stove. And they should go, why? Because it's really hot and you'll burn yourself. And if you burn yourself, you get blisters. So now the kid understands why he shouldn't touch it, because he doesn't want blisters. If you tell somebody, no, don't touch the stove, naturally you do the opposite. Okay, you try and control somebody, they fight for control. They'll touch the stove. Then what do you say? I told you not to touch the stove, you stupid person. Like, it's your own fault. And now the kid's crying and you're shouting at them for touching the stove and saying it's your own fault. And all that kid needed to know was, why should I not touch the stove? Something simple can have such a life-changing effect on the mentality of a kid and how they see authority, how they listen to orders or management in their role and their job. If you've been told don't do that your whole life by your parents, and your boss comes to you and says, can you do this? The difference is you would either react and go, you know, I'll do it when I'm ready or whatever, or you just go, absolutely fine, I'll do it when I can. And we don't realize that just simple stuff like that is shaping how our kids see the world. And it's so simple to tweak. Just don't tell somebody what to do. Help them understand why it's in their best interest, not to do it. And it's just that communication, that time to communicate something to somebody that no one does anymore. They just focused on, I don't see it like that, don't do it. And no kid understands why, you know?
It's that level of love and protection, right? None of us want our kids to get hurt, but at a certain point, you can't keep them constrained, or they'll never be able to face challenges, right? And face resilience, right? If you tie their shoes for them forever, right? They're gonna be 18, not being able to tie their shoes. Like, what help is that? But it's that level of just society today. You think about, moms, right? Think of a single mom or a mom that's working, right? She's working at the same time, trying to cook dinner, right? And then her kids are, climbing on the couch, and the kid's sitting on top of the couch. And instead of, she's on the phone trying to work, she's cooking dinner, right? And the quickest thing is reaction, say, no, get down, right? And so for them to be cognizant of that also has to take an effect, just how quick things are moving, right? And so it is that point where if you just say no all the time, if you tell the kid, get down every time they climb something, right? They're never going to explore it, because every time they think that they climb up something, like something bad's going to happen. If I climb up something, I'm going to get injured, right? And then they can't walk downstairs, right? It's that simple part. But as a parent, it's also good for us to slow down, because our quick reactions, it seems right in the moment, because we're doing it out of love and care. Like, get down, we don't want you to fall, or we don't want you to get hurt or get burned, right? But in the fact, is the child aware of why we're saying no? Most of the time, no. But it is hard to stop in the moment just to have that space. And so I see both sides of it, right? But it's very easy for us to be so busy that we're too busy for ourselves and our family. But also to stop in a pace of society is very important for us to be aware of, because each decision we're making is not, it's getting back to that organized chaos again. We're again acting in organized chaos with just even our family members, because there's no order to how we're producing the results for them.
Yeah, it comes down to self-awareness of oneself at all times. There's no one should have the excuse of, oh, I was on the phone and I just had to say get down, because if you choose to have a kid, then you're taking sole responsibility of that kid until it's old enough to go off. So you should know that everything that I do, the kid's going to see and model and see and become. So if I'm always on the phone for 18 years and I just say no, get down, that's not an excuse to say, sorry, Maureen, hang on a sec. Darling, would you mind getting down? Because if you fall, you're going to hit yourself, and, hospital's miles away, and we can't afford healthcare because it's 10 grand, and which means you can't have Christmas. You say that once to the kid, you're now going to be on the phone free forever of saying no, get down, because you gave 20 seconds out of your time to explain to that kid, get down. Whereas if we just say, get down, get down, get down, the kid's now going to keep doing that. and do the opposite every single time. And that's a mindset trait. I actually know somebody who is so good with explaining to their child. She's a single mum, and she's so good at explaining everything to the point where that kid wouldn't climb up. That kid will just sort of look at her mum and wait for her mum to say, "Sorry, what, darling?" And then the kid would say something. "Can I get up?" "No, because if you fall, mummy can't help because she's on the phone." "Okay." That kid's so disciplined by her mum because she's given that time to explain, or at least show that mummy will explain to you whatever you need to know, that you don't need to climb up to get a reaction. So then I fight for a reaction or a response from my mum, as almost if she's too busy to respond, that you're doing something on purpose because that's the only time she notices you. Doesn't bother. She's always on the phone, always on WhatsApp and Facebook. That only when you climb up does she give some energy and attention to you. That's your energy from your mum. Versus if you know your mum's going to give you that attention, you won't need to climb up, because if you just stand there like a dog looking at you, the dog wants to go out. And of course, what do? You let the dog out.
There's that point in life is that, as we grow, we're learning too. And so many people, that's why we see a lot of society continue to just have, mental health problems, right? And say 80,000 thoughts, 60,000 thoughts a day, and, 75, 80% of them are negative, right? And so we're facing our own demons as we're going through our day, trying to, again, now we're bringing kids in the world. Now we do that with the greatest purpose, but we're all learning as well. And so people come to listen to podcasts like this so they can just take a moment to be aware of just how they're showing up for friends and family, because we don't realize it until we realize it. Right. And so many people, when they're acting as parents, they don't realize they're acting in a way that needs attention until it becomes apparent that they need to. Right. But they have to be the one to recognize it. We can point out, just like, it's an accountability thing. Like we don't want to be accountable to ourselves, but we will hold everybody else accountable to us. And at most times we'll say, "Hey, you didn't show up on time. You were supposed to be here for this meeting. You're supposed to hand this in. You were supposed to do this. You're supposed to do that." But then we got up late. We didn't do the right thing. We didn't do what we were going to say. Right. And so it's very easy for us to always look outwards. And so when we can be self-aware, it takes the first level of us starting to be self-aware. And as we, start out on our journey to live our highest calling, right, we have to start the journey, because most of us repeat the same days, right, the same habits. It's what 40 to 85% of your day is habits that you repeat. And so if they're negative habits, it's just negative habits of what you do subconsciously, right? So you're doing 95% of your day subconsciously, just acting as had you done the other day. And so you aren't even aware that you're just saying to your kid, just stop. You're just doing things on autopilot most of the points until you're not. And the effects that can have on your family, on your friends, on your relationship, on you mentally, right, are enormous. And that's why we see people struggle in such light, personally, relationship wise, financially, is because they're just absolutely repeating the same things each and every day. And then they can't wonder why they can't break out of the habits. So as they have kids, they're just doing exactly what they're on autopilot with, without taking into account the effects of them, until for some reason they decide, right, they listen today, they listen to something else, and something pops into their mind that they need to take notice of what they've just done. And then that's where the ripple effect starts and can build from there.
Yeah. And, it's people who have lots of siblings, there's always, like, call it the latter part of the litter, not in all cases, that end up being deprived of parent attention, because you have the first kid, everything goes into that kid, you've got it at your system, serving the kid, cooking for the kid, and the second one comes along, or the third one comes along. At that point, you're like, I can't be asked, right? And so there's always a balance of, there's always a difference between, say, the first sibling, maybe second sibling, and the other siblings that are born later, to the point where they will see what was right or wrong in the dynamic. Now they can observe, oh, mum always says get down, brother always tries to get up and does the opposite. So now that older sibling, or the younger sibling, can see that narrative, and actually they can choose because they've seen it. Whereas the kid's in it, the mum's in it, the younger sibling can see it. So now they'll often grow up to be completely different to the sibling. And that's when you get this sibling rivalry, where they start, in the will, fighting for the mum dies, and then they start trying to fight for the will, because you've got one sibling that just wanted mum's attention, the kid that's always trying to climb up. Mum says get down. That kid will often resent the other kid, who just was a nice, happy kid, just floated around the house, didn't cause a pain or a nuisance. That mum doesn't give as much time to the kid that says get down, because he's a nuisance. He always gets up when she says get down. The other kid's just nice, doesn't try and get up. So now that kid gets more attention. The kid that keeps trying to get up gets less attention. That kid grows up to hate the brother, right? So the pattern is that kid was trying to fight for attention. The mum just kept saying get down. They became a nuisance. But the other kid has had time to observe the difference between how to get the attention. Mum just gives me the attention and I do nothing because I'm just not being annoying twat. Mum doesn't give as much attention to older brother because he's always getting up, and then the mum says get down. But he doesn't realize that he's doing the opposite. What he's doing is pushing away what he really wants, which is basically attention from the mum. Yeah, that just came to my mind on that.
Yeah, I like it. It's, from parents, and you hear this out there, is like the first kid, you think every step they do is like their foot's going to break, right? Or going to fall down. And then the second kid, you're like, okay, that wasn't that bad with the first kid. Nothing happened. By the third kid, you're like, oh, they just need to fall down. Just let them fall down, right? And so you have that transition as when you see parents out there, like the first kid, like every step they take, you better watch out, right? The ground's going to collapse, right? But the third kid, you're letting them, climb up a hill and jump off, right? Because you understand that it's not going to kill them, and it allows them to explore too, right? So we all transition as we have more information and as we find our comfort level, right? And it's like a lot of things like in life, like when we explore too, it's that same thing. Like we do things at first that, you think back 5 years ago, like one of the biggest risks you take, you probably can't think about it, right? But today, it's not even a risk anymore because you did it at the time, in the moment, right? And allowed you to just transcend to where you are today, because it seemed like a mountain to climb at the moment, but today it's just a speed bump. Right. And so when you look at things like that, and many times the challenges we're facing today seem like monumental challenges, but it's things we're going to grow through. And then years from now, it's going to be what's made us into what we are in two ways. It could either decapitate us in a moment, and we just can't mentally grow through it because we're not welcome to the challenge and we get stuck in rotation. It's not self-serving. Or we face the challenge, and at the moment it seems difficult, or it is difficult, right? But then the next day it gets a little less difficult, and the next day it gets a little less difficult, and then months go by, weeks go by, years go by, and it's helped us to who we became. And now we're facing new challenges that seem monumental, that today might be monumental, but tomorrow they'll be less monumental, and the next day as we continue to grow from them, right? And so it's usually the evolution of us as a person. It's not easy in the moment, but many times we don't know what we need in the moment, and usually it's what's really going to help us get to be where we want to be in our life.
Yeah, right. Anything you want to promote or plug before we finish?
Sure. Yeah, I have a podcast. You go Live 100 podcast with Jason Yerousi. It's just short quips on going out there and help you leveling up on peak performance. And find more about us at jasonyerousi.com.
And if you had one day left to live, what is the one thing that you would say to the world?
Smile more, be kind. There's plenty of time to go out there and push and be angry and be aggressive and go apart, but smile more. It's better than you think right now.
Okay, right. Thank you very much for coming on. Let me stop that there and say goodbye. Thanks for listening. If you like this episode, please remember to subscribe, turn the bell notifications on, like the episode, and comment below. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, it's YesKingOliver. Take a look at the other videos to your side. And if you just want to listen to this podcast, you can do so on Apple and Spotify and most other platforms by going to talkwitholiver.com.